I have my
So,
glasses, so I actually made notes, and I have notes.
wow. I
I
have notes
know.
too, but I would expect me to have notes. I would not expect you to have notes.
Well, I'm not going to follow my notes, but I just want you to know that I have notes. Damn it.
Hello, I'm Ken Kinsley, and this is Finding the Words, the only podcast devoted to text based art and artists. Through this show, I've had an opportunity to meet an array of talented, thoughtful artists and art professionals whose paths I would have probably never had the good fortune to cross. And since I record the interviews remotely, I've only had the pleasure of meeting one of my guests in person. Until now. This time, instead of finding out about someone new, I'm digging into my own past to chat with someone who's been an important part of my growth, both in terms of art and personally. And as we'll touch on later in our talk, I'm not the only one who can say that. Today's guest is Greg Miller, whose large-scale painting collage hybrids, as stated in the bio on the website of his longtime gallery, William Turner Gallery, creates paradoxes around the conventional iconography of post-war America. The artist's uniquely California perspective interweaves high and low culture, labor and leisure, to assemble a complex of images and texts. His work is quintessentially California cool, even if he left his beloved Venice, California years ago, and now lives and works near Austin, Texas. In addition to painting, Greg has been a filmmaker and a graphic designer, as well as, most importantly to me personally, Mr. Miller was my design instructor at the then Art Institute of Southern California in Laguna Beach in the late 80s and on into the early 90s. Life has a habit of getting in the way, so we hadn't had an opportunity to chat for quite some time. So if you'll indulge me, this episode is a couple of guys catching up on lost time and filling in the gaps with some great stories about how old ghost towns in Northern California shaped Greg's work, his brushes with art world luminaries, the power of relationships, both as formal elements in the work and in personal relationships. And I'm not really sure how this story escaped me back in the day, the infamous Keith Haring volleyball incident. So, here's my chat with Greg Miller. So, first off, there is one phrase that seems to come up over and over again for you, and you are kind of a self-described contemporary cave painter. So, what does
Yeah.
that phrase mean to you?
It means that I just sort of, I guess I'm going to be the storyteller of our tribe, whatever our tribe is, you and me and Peterson and everybody else, right?
Yeah.
Just sort of, and so I'm in the cave with whoever's in the cave with me, and we're just sort of telling the story of our time, how I see it. It may be the wrong story, but that's what I'm doing. I kind of like
Mm-hmm.
that idea, you know. So that's kind of what I and I'm also kind of a little bit of an archaeologist. I'm always like when I do my paintings, I'm always collaging and putting tons of stuff on it. And then I sort of dig into it, and then
Mm-hmm.
language comes up and imagery. So that's always kind of a fun thing for me because I never know what I'm going to get. And then most of the time I just paint over it anyway. So
Mm-hmm. So there's a
yeah,
lot of stuff in there that we don't get to see.
well, yeah, right. But sometimes I let it stay and I use it, and so I kind of create my own place. But so that's what the cave painting. I kind of like that idea of being a contemporary cave painter,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to a graffiti artist or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And you've already kind of brought up one of the things I was going to talk to you about, in that your art and your career seem to be defined a lot by relationships. Now, like in your art, there's this constant push and pull between text and image, the polished resin and the rough edges underneath. There's nostalgia but contemporary issues. How did you come around to that style? We'll talk about the other part of the relationships in a second, but in terms of all that, like push and pull between all those things, how did that come about?
Again, I just maybe kind of partially organic. It just sort of developed. I think we talked about it. I mean, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and so there was I think, like I said, Mad Magazine, Rat Saints, the surf culture, skateboard culture, and then just signage that was around me kind of affected me. And that was already kind of this formalist, formalistic kind of imagery that was there. It just sort of got in my brain, sort of, you know. So it kind of
Mm-hmm.
naturally happened, push and pull. between
Mm.
color and shapes, and then letters and words, and then images. Um, so yeah, that's how I think that's how it sort of developed. And I think too, like when I was talking to Barb about this the other day about how um, when I was a kid with my mom, went to movies all the time. So I would see like twice a week we'd go see a movie. So I'd see like the Lawrence of Arabia, these big, West Side Story. But I think there was that contrast between words and imagery and the scale of it and the color. I just sort of, I guess I picked up on it.
Mhm.
So
Now there's a lot of words in your work, obviously, and a lot of images along with that. Do you start with words and like if you're looking through collage stuff, you
yeah, I
have a big
always loved.
trove. What's that?
Yeah, I always loved words. I just like, I mean, I always was, yes, I always loved the words. I just like I would when I was a kid, I would paint the word surf on a piece of paper, or I would, like in my early paintings, I would just take Life magazine from the 50s and 60s. I don't know if anybody knows what Life magazine is
Yeah, really.
anymore. But anyway, I would just blue or Playboy or just a magazine. Now I use like W or something other magazine but I would just
Mm,
glue it down page for page, and kind of in an arbitrary, minimalist way, just because I love the way text looks on by itself mounted on canvas. I just loved it,
mm,
but it wasn't enough.
mhm.
Conceptually, it just wasn't enough. But I loved it. I
Do you
fucking loved it.
start do you start with a word or words and then try to find images that go with that? Do you have images and then say, "Ooh, I need to find this word to go with that image," or does it just sort of happen?
I do lots of little drawings and stuff, and I
Mm,
mean, how I start my paintings or whatever. I mean, I make little drawings and things for my paintings, and then that's what they become, little sort of miniatures, kind of like Kurt Schwitter's, if you know that German art, Swiss artist
mhm,
is. I kind of make these little collages, and then that's how I begin. And then that collage sort of has an abstract outline or a story. And then each painting, I will take a textbook, not a textbook, but like a book by Steinbeck or Hemingway, and I'll just glue it down page for page before I paint white over it. So you never get to see all that underground history that's there. And I
mhm,
just do it because I don't know, some sort of alchemy, kind of when I work with the words and these old found pages and books and stuff, it's sort of, there's a part of alchemy to it that for
mhm.
me. That's why I mixed resin and put resin on it and kind of thing. All the materials for that. And then anyway, yeah. Cut me off anytime. Shut
Not at
up.
all, not at all. So
Talking
you
at the
you
bar,
have
my friends would go, "Will you just shut up?" You know, uh, and laugh about that. Anyway, so
Well, you have a lot of different influences happening in here. You've got, kind of California surf culture in like 50s, 60s, 70s type stuff we were just talking about. The, like kind of old magazines and nostalgia movies, especially westerns. I know you're really into westerns as well. Is there one of these influences that kind of rises above for you?
I think it's all a mix. I think that partly too, a lot of my teachers when I was in school, and I just went to like state. I went to San Jose State and University of Nevada in Reno. I was kind of into ski culture and all that for a long time. But anyway, there's a couple of guys like Wally Hendricks or George Herms or different guys, these beatnik guys, kind of influenced me a little bit to
Hmm.
keep going with language. And then my mom grew up my mom is an old rancher girl she was born in Truckee. So as an early age, my grandmother and her would take me out to these old towns that were all run down, like Bodie, California. And inside there was just all these old cans and books and things were just nailed onto the wall to stop the wind from coming in. And so I think that influenced me too a lot. And I
Hmm.
think too a lot of it is like I think that it sort of becomes like I, I I mean I don't really think about nostalgia so much. I just kind of want to reclaim the used landscape, and it's a kind of a shared vision with everybody. And I sort of think sometimes too, Ken, that like the painting is a front man, Like I paint a realistic painting. That's kind of the front man. But the real story is all these little bits of poetry and pieces of collage and these things that goes is mixed in there too. Is later that
Hmm.
comes along, and it's sort of really it's like a random urban. It's random urban poetry. I really think it's
Hmm.
more like that. And pop art. And I got pop art's what I kind of do a little bit. I guess I don't know what else to call it. And that's the cards I got dealt. I sort of stayed true to it. You know,
Hmm.
Roy Lichtenstein gets the award, but I just keep painting pop art. I can't help. I've always done that. So
Sure. I
yeah,
mean, but it shifts, and it's like
yeah, it does shift.
rock and roll is not Buddy Holly anymore. So,
Right.
and talking about this, and I want to get back to pop art for sure, but talking about putting the words and the language in there. One thing I noticed you had talked about before is you always include some sort of positive language somewhere in the work. Do you
Yeah,
try to
the
impart?
little pieces of poetry when you look at the painting, besides the words and everything, there's there's a story that's laid out there, and it's pieces from E. E. Cummings or Robert Frost or whoever else I kind of steal from more or less, and cut
Mhm,
it and put it in there. There is it's all a positive story. You're right, it is. Instead of,
mhm.
I mean, I'm always talking about that. The words are always kind of positive, and words of nature, like the road was covered in snow and the trees fell over. But there's just sort of it is always positive. I always thought if I'm going to tell a story, I want it to be a heroic story and make it more positive on the side. And westerns are definitely an influence of that. Totally,
Oh, sure.
that's true. It's my Shakespeare. So
Mhm.
you know, I get Magnificent Seven instead of Romeo and Juliet or Henry. I do like Henry V though. I do like that. His
Mhm.
speech at the end of the St. Crispin's Day speech. I do love that. But anyway, yeah,
In terms of other relationships, it's those relationships within the work, but then outside of the work, um, it's all these relationships with people that have really kind of been important throughout your career. You've been with your longtime gallery and gallerist William Turner since 1991, and you were actually his first show. You opened
right, right.
the
I
gallery.
think I was there even before. I was there a little bit earlier with Bill. Yeah, Bill and
Hmm.
I have been together a long, long time.
Yeah, I
Man, I
mean,
can't believe it.
it's more of a partnership than most gallerist artist relationships. It seems to me from the outside, at least.
Yeah, I mean the business of art's a whole other. I mean Bill's a really great guy. He is awesome. Uh, he's also honest, which
Hmm.
is hard to find with a lot of agents or art
Hmm.
dealers, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Some of the earth.
Ha-
No, he's very, very supportive and really good. He's hung with me through all of the craziness and all that, and been really good. And he's slugged his way out in L.A. really hard. And he has a lot of great people he shows with and works with, and
mhm.
yeah, I was lucky to. That was his first show. Yeah,
Over on Market Street in Venice. Must have been an
yeah,
exciting. I mean, that kind of early '90s art
yeah.
scene in
I'm
LA.
doing yeah. I'm trying to put together this coffee table book, and then these pictures called the Market Street Days. And his gallery was right across. His gallery was the old Dwayne Valentine studio, which is Dwayne did these gigantic resin sculptures, and he was across the street from this restaurant called 72 Market Street.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so that was pretty fun. And so the opening day, I'm in the back room working. And he goes, "Greg, there's someone out here that wants to see you, talk to you." So I walk out, and Rauschenberg had uh,
Robert
the rest,
Rauschenberg.
yeah, the
Yeah.
restaurant. Actually, there's a picture of us together. Across the street was it's 72 Market Street. Dennis Hopper, the actor, was kind of involved with the restaurant, but they were doing shows all the time. So Hopper just had a photography show he had just done, kind of based on the movie The Colors that he had done. Colors,
Hmm.
with Sean
Yeah.
Penn.
Yeah, the movie.
So
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. So and his friend Tingley had just passed away. Rauschenberg, which was this guy who did these amazing sculptures in New York. And so he was kind of walking around photographing, just wandered into the gallery we're setting up, and we just hung out the whole day with him and talked, and it was really kind of an
Wow.
amazing time to do that. And then I'd run into him anyway. So yeah, so I was so that was a fun time for sure. Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
yeah. I missed Venice at that time a lot. I missed that kind of. I lived there for almost 35 years. I mean,
Wow.
believe it or
Mhm.
not, is that wild? What the
I
hell?
know. You were downtown LA for a little bit, right off of,
Yeah, about a year and a half. I lived on First
mhm,
in Vignes, then a Sixth in Maine. Well, when I was teaching college in Laguna Beach, that's how I had my place set up, and I couldn't really afford it to go to Venice and buy something there and build a studio. Because it was not
mhm.
like New York; you kind of had to build your own studio. You know, the storefronts on Abbot Kinney, they were kind of. And
Oh, yeah.
when I went to San Jose State, my teachers were all from LA, and they would fly up for the day and then come back. You could fly up for $12 and then fly back. So I
Wow.
know. So they would always bring me down to like, Bob Graham's studio. I'd spend the night there, or we'd do all that stuff. And so I learned it. I said, this is if I'm not going to be in New York, then I'm going to be in Venice Beach. This is where I think looks like a good place to be and
Mhm,
work and try to paint. More so than San Francisco, even though San Francisco had this, much more language based um, kind of history, and because of the beatnik movement and
mhm.
the 60s and all these kind of things and the constant political stuff. But I just thought I would, because I've always wanted to make a living as an artist. That was didn't want to be poor.
Mhm.
When I went to work at Newport Harbor Art Museum for when Paul Schimmel was the curator, and I was there. I designed catalogs and annual reports and all that stuff for them. I realized right then and there that it's a huge business, and I'm like, oh, okay, oh, I get it. So I don't know how
That
exactly.
fine art is a huge business?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally, totally. I didn't really realize. I mean, I kind of did, but because a lot of my teachers that were from the '50s, they drove cabs in New York, then they just painted or made this stuff on the side, and they were happy, and that's nothing wrong. That's fully fine.
Sure.
It's just that I didn't. I realized that my competition was going to be painting and working every day. So if I had a 40-hour a week job, how the hell am I going to paint or work or
Yeah.
what am I going to do? And some people get lucky out of the chute, it just happens for them.
Mhm. And now you were
It's,
a designer. I
yeah,
wanna get back into some of those relationships in a second, but let's get to design. You just brought that up. You you
yeah,
you were my design teacher at Art Institute of Southern California, plus you worked for Newport Harbor Art Museum.
yeah.
You had
I
your
was their
own
art director for that, and then
you had your own
well,
firm for a while.
I did a little bit, and then I had '69. I lived in Squaw Valley, California. Okay,
Mhm.
and so I was always interested in graphic design, and I always liked letter form. I always loved that stuff. But I started to make and design T-shirts and stuff for the ski industry. I wanted to make the ski industry like the surf industry. So I kind of, while I was going to San Jose State, I took a lot of graphic design courses, and I really didn't know why I did, but I just did. And I started taking them, and we'd hand letter Bedoni with the Rapidograph pen. People don't even know what Rapidograph
Oh,
pens
yeah.
are. Anyway, but that's kind of what we did. So I fell in love with that. And then when I graduated from school, these guys in San Francisco, Dodger, Sparks and Silva, had a really hot ad agency in San Francisco, and they hired me to work for them. So I went to work for them for about a year or 2 years, and then I realized I didn't want to be, I didn't want to do advertising and all that. And
Mhm.
back then, you have to realize, if someone give you 1,000 word essay, you had to measure the type that you wanted to do the leading, line length. Then you had to order the type from a type house. Then I had to cut it, put it on a board with
Mhm.
hot wax. I mean, just primitive crap, right?
Oh, yeah,
Really,
yeah.
right? Blue
Old
line to
school.
blue,
Yeah.
rugalistic, all this kind of weird shit. So, but in a way, I kind of still work like that when I'm making paintings. I use my X-Acto knife, and anyway, but so that's how I started kind of working. I really I made some money in the ski industry, doing really well with the t-shirts, and I was in Squaw Valley at the right place at the right time for the freestyle circuit, and I was
Hmm.
surrounded by all this, and it was a big thing. So um, that kind of influenced my work. But I realized later that I just wanted to paint. I didn't want to be going to advertising and design or clothing or
You
fashion. Or,
didn't want to do the bouncing back and forth.
no, you couldn't. I
What
couldn't paint and work in an ad agency at the same time.
mhm. what
I
what
could.
what for you is the biggest difference between design and painting?
God, that's a good question. I don't know the answer.
Especially the way you
And
work, like you were just bringing it up, like the old school typesetting with without the sanding and the resin sounds exactly like your work now,
well,
and the
it
painting
is
on
in
it.
a lot of
I
in
mean,
a lot of ways it is. It is. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
served you
galleries
well.
will call, go, hey, can we have some of these? Can you paint? Give us a show of women. So it's kind of like a client, calling up and going,
Mhm.
well, we do this. Can you design wine labels
Hmm.
with just women? You know. So in a
Mhm.
way, I kind of, I draw the line with big clowns or whatever, but I would. There's a lot of similarities to it, I guess.
Mhm.
There is. I mean,
Mhm.
for me, some artists would disagree and probably don't look at it like that. So I've always had to really hustle. I was in LA for 10 years before I got a show. I did everything I could, but I was hustled like a drunk sailor. I was crazy, and there are a lot of similarities to it, for sure. You're right. I learned how to work hard, how to work with my hands, and how to, just because everything I do is handmade. So
Mhm.
that part of it is similar for sure.
Mhm. And getting back to the personal relationships, besides William Turner, you also exhibit with Joanne Artman, who's in
I do.
Laguna
Mhm.
Beach in
Yeah.
New York as well. How did that one come about?
She just approached me one time, and
Mhm.
we just uh, we hit it off, and I've just been working with her ever since. And I've shown with a lot of galleries before that. I mean, God,
Mhm.
galleries have closed and come and gone. A lot of art dealers come and go. It's
Mhm.
crazy.
And if I'm not wrong, didn't one of the art dealers run off with about 15 of your paintings and never
Yeah, my first
return?
show in New York on 54th Street next to Faith Wildenstein, this woman,
Oh my
I
god.
can't even remember. Yeah, she just stole my show, and another gallery, another artist guy. I can't remember. He's really well known. I can't remember his name now. Yeah, she just stole my whole show, and she did a really
It
good
happened
catalog,
twice?
huh?
It
Just
happened
once,
twice?
just
Okay.
the one,
Okay.
just the once. And then she closed and disappeared. She probably took all the art into Dubai and got a hotel room at the Ritz Carlton and sold it in Dubai for sure. You know, no, really, that's
That's crazy.
Donald Cuspett's a really famous art historian and writer, and he wrote the essay for my catalog for that show, and that was a kind of a good thing. But that got me, ironically, in this crazy business, that got me to a really good gallery in San Francisco, by these two women that the gallery's closed now, and then
Mhm.
another guy, Tom Kidder from Boston, Tom
Mhm.
Smith, Kidder Smith guy, but he's closed his gallery. But they came and saw my show, and then because even though I lost all my work from that show, I still got great gallery people from that.
Mhm.
That's how I have to look at it. You know, uh, it was really kind of a weird deal. So I have
Well,
stories.
beside
I definitely
what's
have
that?
stories. I have stories. I do.
Oh yeah, and
I have
that's why you're
experience.
here.
I mean, like, yeah. No, I mean, and when
and,
you're like artists. I mean, you're so desperate to get a show and get. It's hard. Some people get shows right out of graduate school. Like if you go to Yale or whatever,
mhm.
you get or Cal Art. If I'd have gone to Cal Arts, maybe that would have been better. I don't know, but I thought you had to be
Mhm.
really talented. And I this is sort of sounds childish and immature, but the skiing was just too fucking good. The powder, the whole, I got seduced, right? My
Yeah.
mom was from Truckee, and so when I was living in Squaw Valley, I lived there from '69 to '79, and I would go down to San Jose State and film I was working on, and I lived in this really cool house in Squaw Valley, and the skiing was just too damn good, back then. It sounds ridiculous. I know artists will ever say that, right?
No,
Like
no. I
every
mean,
year, say, oh, the skiing was just too good. I'm going to stay here. No, those guys were smarter. They went right to New York. I probably should have done that, but I don't know. It is what I can't change it now.
well, in addition to all the gallery stuff, you, as we mentioned, you were my professor in the late
Right,
'80s, early
right,
'90s,
right. When
and
I was
you taught. What's that?
No, well, when I was working at Newport Harbor Art Museum, a woman named Kim Lipsey, who's a really talented artist, and she was head of the development department at the museum,
Hmm.
and which is, they get all the grants and the finances, and she went to work for Art Institute, and they called me down there to do a show to design a catalog for the college, and that's how I got to that college. I mean, that's how I was hired.
And as an editorial point of uh, uh, the clarification here for the show, Art Institute of Southern California was in Laguna Beach, and they've since changed their name to Laguna College of Art and Design. So it's still
Right.
there, but different name. But go ahead. Sorry.
A great campus, and really talented
Hmm.
like yourself. Really a group of talented young kids that would come through there. They really were. It's a small school in the canyon. There's something magical about it, and I was so lucky to be able to teach there for. I think I taught there for
Yeah.
5 years and gave up a tenured teaching job. Can you believe that? All you guys were graduating and leaving. I didn't want to stay around anymore. You know,
Hmm.
Does that make
Hmm.
for me? I got it not emotionally involved, but I just thought, I really put a lot into it. So I guess my style of teaching was a little more unorthodox, maybe a little bit. I
Hmm.
was really trying to get everybody to have portfolios when they left and really go get a job.
Hmm.
That was my goal.
Yeah.
So when you guys left, I thought, well, God, I'm just going to go too. I'm going to stay around, right?
And you stayed in touch with a lot of. You were also you taught grad school. Am I correct at Claremont?
Yeah, I did.
I
I
did not
did.
follow you there, but you were. So you
Smart.
had a lot of us former students. John Peterson, Audra Weiser, Chad Barron,
Johnny
John
Quebec,
Garrett.
Johnny Old School for those. Yeah, no, I was making art I was painting and had a career as a painter, and I wasn't doing graphic design anymore. And I was head of the
Hmm.
visual communications department. I was just trying to build the department and get that part going. Because when I got to Art Institute, so doing a school of art and design, technology has changed the industry. It revolutionized the industry, right?
Hmm.
So I had to figure out a way to bring Apple computers to the college, to the lab, get a technician, and because the way I had learned to do everything was obsolete, was gone. Nobody did that,
Hmm.
worked that way
Hmm.
anymore. So it was all digital. So um, so I was doing that and not teaching fine art so much, but I was all but and Roland Reese at the time was kind of a famous guy out of Los Angeles, was chairman of the Claremont Graduate School. So
Hmm.
he came and lectured at Art Institute one time, and it was really great. And I got those kids to go to school there, and he was really awesome. Gave them scholarships. It was pretty. He was a great artist. I missed him. He's
Hmm.
gone now. But anyway,
Yeah. So a lot of those people we just mentioned, like I was an assistant in your design studio for a bit.
oh
Most of these
yeah,
other people were also art studio assistants for you. And I was just talking
yeah,
with Peterson yesterday about how, he pointed out what a really kind of wonderful legacy you've passed on with all these people out there. And they're, as he put it, they're still functioning artists and using all that
yeah.
knowledge and all these
They're all
great stories that you've passed on.
well, they are so freaking talented. I think they're all in some ways better than I am as painters. I mean, they're really good, and we just had to for whatever reason, we just took the show on the road. When I moved to Venice, I needed assistants to build stuff, to make stuff, help me glue shit down.
Hmm.
So, and it seemed like a good idea at the time, and it just sort of happened. and we surfed together and played handball and all that kind of stuff down at the beach. But, you know, I don't know if anybody
Nice.
knows what handball is anymore. But
Oh,
it's funny when I
yeah.
go to New York for sure. When I go to New York, I go in the village and they have these handball courts. They're one wall, and I always hang out and we just watch them play a little bit. It's fun.
Speaking of New York, I remember you mentioning back in the day that you had hung out at Warhol's factory.
Well, when I was at Newport Harbor Art Museum, they'd sent me. They were gonna, museums build shows and then they sell them out to other museums. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Absolutely.
So yeah, so they wanted to do it. So I was their graphic designer, which means I do like all the educational text. This is a whole other story on the wall. So the museum, like
Yeah.
educational text, walk in the room, Ken Peasley podcast, So but
Mm-hmm.
back in the day, we had to hand paint, we silk screen that text on the wall, and then had to hand
Silk
paint it. And that,
screened.
yeah, and it would drip, and I'd have to
Wow.
hand paint it. And so now they have like a large, letter-set materials they use, which is really pretty
Hmm.
good. Anyway, so they sent me out to New York because they were going to do this exhibition of Warhol, and the exhibition never got uh, formalized or done.
Mm. But you got to hang out and you
Yeah,
met
well, I
Warhol.
talked to him. He was doing the at that time he was doing his copper paintings where he keyed on them. I don't know if you've ever seen those.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
so they were kind of a really abstract work. He wasn't. This was kind of later on in his career,
yeah.
and the show never developed. I was just gonna, yeah. So that was yeah,
Bummer.
wild for me. He told me you should move to New York, and I'm like, whoa, yeah, okay. I didn't I didn't think about it like that. I didn't plan my career so strategically, you might
Hmm.
say,
Well,
right? You know,
you eventually moved to Long
I did.
Island.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I moved to New York. Yeah, after so it's a long story. And it gets it's kind of yeah. So when my mom and when my parents lived in Santa Monica, they moved from Northern
Hmm.
California, and then when my dad passed away, my mom I was taking care of her, and she just didn't want to be in LA anymore. And we just decided that we would just go somewhere else. And so we moved to New York. We moved to Texas for a while. I took care of her
Hmm.
there. And then here's what's really amazing. These stories seem so like bullshit. But I take my mom to this place in Austin, Texas, and she meets this woman named Jenny Hughes. And Jenny Hughes' son is Fred Hughes. And Fred Hughes was Andy Warhol's manager, right? I mean, what the
That's
fuck, right?
crazy.
No, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
And he helped introduce Andy Warhol into the social fabrication of New York. And I mean, in her apartment, she has a huge her yeah. Every when you live in one of these places, right, you have kind of a really nice apartment. In her apartment, she has a gigantic silk screen, huge, of Mick Jagger leaning against the wall. And then she has another huge plate painting by Julian Schnabel of Fred Hughes,
Oh my God.
right? Right? And then it's
Wow.
like, what the most women have little figurines and like stuff, and that's great. But I'm just saying here, and so my mom and
Yeah,
her become friends, and Fred had just passed away. But here, my mom's best friend is Andy Warhol's manager's mom,
that's crazy.
and she
What are
has
the
the best.
odds? And
Yeah, what are the odds? And she's like, now, Gregory, that Julian Schnabel just calls me all the time, and he wants to buy that because the plate painting that he had done was a portrait of Fred Hughes because
mhm,
Julian would stay in Paris at his apartment, and so in trade for that, he gave this beautiful portrait of her son on these plate paintings that he did uh, as a gift. But he always wanted to buy the painting back from her. And I always say, Ginny, do not sell him. I'll find some people to buy the painting. Do not. I want the damn thing. But mom passed away there. I lost contact with Jenny. She was so heartbroken. They were such good friends. I
yeah,
would take them to dinner or every Sunday, and they would get all dressed up. It's hilarious. But
sweet. That's very
so
sweet.
I don't know. Yeah. So after my mom passed, living in Texas there, I sold it, and we moved out to Springs, New York, which is on in Long Island, just about a half hour, I would say, south of Montauk,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we were there, and then we could go into Manhattan all the time. And I built a studio there. We did and worked there, and it was really awesome. It was the
That's
most
great.
beautiful place I've ever lived. And
Mm-hmm.
seriously, the winters
And
and
you
it's
were
just
you were right down the street from not just
yeah.
Schnabel probably, but also
Lee Krasner and Jackson Pollock's house, and I lived in Springs, New York. You
mm-hmm.
can't make this shit up, right? We
How
bought a
how
little
far
house,
away from there?
uh, like a 5 minute beach cruiser bike ride. I would get on
Wow.
ride my bike over there with a cup of coffee, and just sit there and just take it in, right? I mean, right?
Wow.
It's weird. It's just, and on a fall day when no one's there, the leaves are turning, the whole thing. It's just, it was just kind of weird and magical. And then I'd go back to my studio and paint and work. And yeah,
Nice.
pretty awesome. We're so lucky to get a place there. And it was cheap, actually. So I know it sounds weird. When I tell people that, they're like, yeah, whatever, Miller. Whatever, you know.
Now, I have a question. We were talking about Laguna Beach a little bit. John Peterson was saying, hey, make sure you ask Greg about the Keith Haring volleyball incident at Laguna Beach.
Oh, right, right. Well,
I don't know what's happening here, but what happened?
when I worked at Newport Harbor Art Museum, if I don't know if the trailer park is still there. It's before Emerald Bay, and I
Mm-hmm,
don't know
mm-hmm.
if the trailer park is there still. I don't know if it
I
is.
think
Anyway,
it's gone.
yeah, well, we were down on the trailer park one day, and Paul Schimmel from the museum, we were gonna uh, we were gonna play volleyball.
Mhm.
Once in a while we'd all like the staff would get together with some artists and we'd play volleyball down at the beach, right? But
Cool.
and of course no one ever photographed anything or documented it,
No,
right? All
no,
the
we
New
just
York
did
guys
stuff. We weren't
document
putting it on
everything,
our Instagram. We just did stuff.
right? So the ball we used was it was Keith Haring had painted this ball, and they brought it. That's the ball we were going to use to play with,
Oh
right?
shit. Yeah.
So a couple of the board members were from the museum. That's kind of why they did. I think the board members there'd been a auction, and one of them had bought the ball at the auction,
Oh no.
and so we were playing, and then as you can imagine, most of the people that were playing aren't exactly great athletes. I won't,
I
I
get
mean,
it. Yeah, it's a
well,
pickup volleyball game.
great
Yeah.
curators, great volleyball. So anyway, they get hit the ball, and it was on Highway 101 or Highway
On PCH.
highway, PCA. The
PCH.
ball
Yeah.
bounced up PCA. So Schimmel yells, Miller, so I'm like running up PCA, chasing the carrying ball. And there was a moment there when I was thinking, I'm just going to kick it in the woods, in the weeds here, and say, couldn't find it.
Don't know
And
what happened to it.
come back and get it later.
It's like
I
the
know.
Babe Ruth ball in the Sandlot. Oh
Yeah, so I
no.
got the ball and brought it back like an idiot. And here's the ball. So
Hope you
yeah,
don't mind.
I hope you
Oh
don't
no.
mind.
Where's
Isn't
the
that
ball
fun?
now? Do you know? Is it at the
Well, it's
museum still
probably
or?
that museum now. It was in Fashion Island, um, and
Oh, the Newport Harbor. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and that museum became, I think, the Orange Coast Museum of
Mm-hmm.
Contemporary Art or something. And they
Or
tore the
Orange
building.
County Museum. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they tore the building down, and now the Fashion Island's a kind of a nice place in Newport Beach.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and Paul Schimmer is a really good curator, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he was with Mocha for a while. Am I
Yeah, and
correct?
then we left
Yeah.
Newport. He was the
In L.A.
Mocha's um, Mocha's curator. He does great
Mm-hmm.
shows. He hangs a good show. He does a good job.
Mm-hmm.
He fired me every once a month, though he fired me. But other than that, pretty funny. But he's a great curator for sure.
I
Funny
can't
shit.
believe you were playing volleyball with the herring. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
and I'm just like,
No,
la la
nobody
la.
brought a different ball. Nobody thought,
What?
maybe maybe this hand painted Keith Haring ball is not a good idea.
Well, at the time, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Like I don't know.
Yeah,
What can I say? It
because
just,
I mean that would have been.
when you're driving into Laguna Beach from
Oh yeah, yeah.
Corona Del Mar,
From the
there's that
yeah,
big cliff there, and there's always to be a little
hmm
trailer park right there. And like I
yeah,
said, I
yeah.
don't
Oh, I know
know
it. Yeah,
if it's still there
yeah.
or not. Anyway, back in
I
the day,
don't
it was.
think it is. I think they turned that into some sort of like luxury bungalow
Oh, well,
thing
I'm
that you can.
shocked.
Yeah,
Wow.
shocking. I
Really
know. Who?
shocked.
Why would we have?
Why would
Why
you
would we
do
have
that?
mobile homes on beachfront property? Come on now.
I
Oh.
know. But the funny thing about the ball, when they hit it, most of the time it just bounced. And I don't know how it bounced like it bounced. And it was a windy, it was always got windy there in the afternoon. Had
Yeah.
an offshore
hmm
wind there. And the wind just picked it up. I could still see that ball bouncing, at 6 feet. And the car kind of like, swerving. And I'm trying to
Oh
get
my
the
God.
ball. Must
I
have
wish I
run
could have
over
seen that one.
fucking Keith
Oh.
Haring, anyway. Being screamed at by the board of trustees. Yeah,
Well, they brought it. Come on, man. Don't
I
complain.
know, but well, they're board members. They don't
Yeah. Yeah.
you don't have to chase the ball.
Yeah. So, kind of going back to the imagery in your work, I know you said it didn't feel nostalgic necessarily, but I mean, it does harken back to a bygone era.
Oh, it
And
does. It does. It
yeah,
does.
and so in this time where a lot of people want to invoke a certain type of, warped nostalgia to, quote unquote, make America great again, does feeling with images steeped in nostalgia feel any different or more important? Weird? Is there any?
They kind of become they become sort of like if you painted the Eiffel Tower all the time, even now, if you went out and photographed the Eiffel Tower, there's just something about the imagery that even though they're nostalgic, they kind of still have. There's something about them that's part of the landscape now, and it's a shared
Mhm,
vision. I mean, it's part of our landscape. Like when you see an old Cadillac, or a
mhm,
picture of a woman sunbathing, or an old transistor radio, or some kind of thing that's in Life magazine. These things, they become sort of, even though I don't know if I attach a nostalgia to them. I think it's just part of telling of a story, and these are the sort of the props that go with it. And
mhm,
even though they are of a different time, they still, for me, there's a little bit of nostalgia to it, but it also helps tell the story I'm trying to tell, whatever that story is. Instead of, I mean, I've never, I haven't put any, cut out any images of iPhones or whatever and put them on paintings yet. I just haven't got them. Probably because I have so many Life magazines and Playboy, so I still cut those out, right? And when I run out of
yeah.
those images, I'll find something else, right? But I had this woman that lived in Costa Mesa, and she had an old used bookstore. God, she was
mhm,
great. And she had this anyway. She had when she was sick and gonna pass away. She called me up and she gave me all of her Playboy magazines. So I'd gone there so often to buy stuff from her. So I had boxes and boxes and boxes of Playboy magazines. Not that I and life. It's not and look. It wasn't like that I was trying to just use Playboy. It was just what was given to me.
mhm,
Right? It
mhm,
wasn't like, oh, I'm going to use Playboy magazine. No, they were just given to me
yeah.
as were look. The magazine look was a kind of, I was glad the word look was pretty cool. And I like life.
Mhm,
They were just given to me. So that's part of it. It's like if someone gave you a whole bunch of paint. People go, well, why do you use red paint so much? Well, that's the paint
So I
that I was
got it.
given. That was,
Yeah.
I mean, now the magazines are like, $25 a magazine.
Oh
Uh,
God, yeah.
so and a lot of them, some of them are really interesting, uh, and a lot of stuff that's in the magazine is going on today. So some of the stuff I cut out and I bury back in there and do and use a little bit of. I use the text from that and I use words. Like words are so important to me with my paintings. And I do paintings without words, I do, but a lot of them it does have text with it. Yeah, it does.
Having known you for a really long time, I know that you, growing up, you struggled with dyslexia. Now, did that play a part in your using text in your art as well as going into
Oh,
design? Kind of,
completely, completely,
yeah.
completely, completely. I mean, I always wanted to be an art. I always wanted to make stuff that was unusual. I mean, I always wanted to be an artist. I just didn't know what it was called, right?
Hmm.
So, well, about in seventh grade, well, I'm going to say sixth grade, maybe, 1960, 1961. I would sit at my desk and think, I am fucking screwed. Something's wrong with me. All my
Mm,
friends would say, "Oh, man, you're such a rebel. You're fighting the man. This is so cool, right?"
mm,
And I really wanted to get good grades. And I, my dad wanted me to go to college, and I was screwed, right? What am I going to do with my life?
mm,
I got F's and D's and everything. F.
mm,
So here's where dyslexia came in. So what I would do is I figured, okay, I'm getting an F in science. I'm getting an F in math. I'm getting an F like in English. So I would go up to the teacher and I would say, look, can I do an extra credit project that would help me bring up my grades, especially in high school? Uh, and they would say, yeah. So I would go home and build these notebooks, Ken, and, a isosceles triangle. I drew a portrait of isosceles, and I would do a binder with acetate overlays and, make a little thing out of balsa wood, whatever it took, right? Then I would bring that in and give it to them, and they would give me a B or a C plus. So so dyslexia helped me. I figured that out that because I couldn't. Everything's upside down and backwards, and all the letters are like kangaroos, and you know. So
mm,
it helped me to. I was lucky to be able to take my art and utilize that. Because like in life, I can't really have a normal job, but if I make something, somebody may give me money for it, right?
oh, absolutely.
So in a way, it's like I kind of got. So I was pitching like in seventh grade. I'd be pitching. I'd build a volcano or, do a huge Custer's Last Stand. Diorama. You know,
Mhm.
seriously.
So they let you, modify the assignment kind of back in the
Yeah,
day
they said,
before that was really kind of the norm in a classroom.
right. I got lucky. I mean, I would go and make a. I would
Yeah.
I would come in after class and really literally pitch them an idea
Hmm.
and be
That's perfect.
enthusiastic about it. And they said, look, if you do it, I'll give you a shot. If you don't do it, you get an F. And I couldn't tell my friends this because my friends are like, "Oh, you're just lazy. You don't want to do shit, you know, right? You're just
Yeah.
lazy. We're sick
You
of
just
hearing
want
about
to,
it. Yeah, you want attention, I was always in the
yeah.
principal's office, always, Ken, always, always, for being the class comedian or whatever. But I wasn't trying to be.
Hmm.
So dyslexia played a, and I didn't really know that. Found out until I was at the museum designing. I was called in. One of the board members was a doctor and had these clinics, and he wanted me to kind of design this big annual report for his clinic. And I said, sure. So I met him in the meeting, and we're having this big meeting at Fashion Eye, and I can still see him. And I'm making notes, and we're talking. He goes, God, you do really good with dyslexia. And I didn't know what dyslexia was. I thought dyslexia meant having sex with dead people. I didn't know. Seriously. I didn't know. Like I thought to myself, that's a weird
I
freaking
beg your
thing.
pardon, sir. Uh,
Excuse me, sir. You said necrophilia, but I didn't know at the time. So even in my dyslexia, I thought sex with dead people. Yeah. So I kind of wrote it down, and I went and had to go look it up. I didn't know what he was talking about.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then I went to this clinic, and it helped me, and so I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. Maybe I'm not crazy, you know? Man, kids, you're in school, you have long addition, right? Remember a long
Hmm.
addition? It
Hmm.
can be 10, 15, long addition, and I would do it, and it would always be wrong. I mean, every one of them on my paper was wrong. And I thought,
Interesting.
what's wrong with me? You know? So anyway,
Because
I was
you
able,
weren't tracking the
I wasn't
the
trapped.
characters. Interesting.
No, I was, I don't know what I was trying my best to figure it out,
Yeah.
Um, and So it's, so anyway, I was able to get through all that and go to college and get through. Yeah, I was lucky, very lucky. Art helped me with dyslexia for sure.
Well, Greg, you have definitely helped out a lot of other artists along the way as well. So,
I don't know
on
about
behalf of a lot of other people, I'd like to thank you.
I'm glad you're
It's
doing
been,
all this. And I'm proud of you. You did good in school. You were good. I don't. It's a hard deal to figure out how to do, and then try to make a living at it.
yeah.
I always tell everybody, come on in. The water's great, but it's just it's a tough racket for sure.
Hmm. Well, Greg, thank you so much.
Hey,
It's been
Ken,
wonderful
thank
chatting.
you. Yeah, love to. Next time I'm in LA, we'll have to have
Absolutely.
drinks or coffee. We'll have to have coffee. We can't have drinks. I can't say that. Yeah, I
Eat.
can't wait to look you up and see all these other shows you're doing. It's exciting.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care. That's it for another episode. Thank you to all of you for listening. Thank you to Greg Miller for coming in and chatting with me today. If you get a chance, please follow or subscribe, whatever they call it, on the service of your choosing. Drop us a comment, give us a rating. We would really love to hear from you. Until next time, thank you. Take care.